Welcome to the Chicago Mayoral debate here on CBS 2. Tonight we have a packed auditorium gathered here at the DuSable Museum to hear from the 5 candidates running for mayor of Chicago. 300 strong here, in fact. Good evening. I'm Rob Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Before we begin tonight, we would like to remember Chicago Alderman Joanne Thompson. For the past 8 years, Ms. Thompson represented the 16th Ward, which includes the Inglewood and Gage Park neighborhoods on the city's south side. She died Monday. Please join me in a moment of silence. Now on to tonight's debate. Election Day, as you know, just 2 weeks away, will focus on issues that impact the African American community, things like business growth, jobs, education, and public safety. And I want to bring in Frank Clark, who's chairman of the board and president of the Business Leadership Council, and Andrea Zopp, who is president and CEO of the Chicago Urban League. It's nice to have both of you here with us. First of all, to you, Andrea, why is it important to ask the candidates where they stand on African American issues?
Well, Rob, African Americans represent 30% of the population in the city, so our vote is critical to this election, but also the issues that impact us, jobs, education, violence, those are important for the whole city. So that's why it's important for these candidates to be here tonight.
All right. And Frank Clark, as president of the Business Leadership Council, why is the mayoral race important to your members?
Well, I want to hear each of these candidates talk about their plan to improve the economy in the African American communities. And as Andy Zopp just says, education, a number of other issues, but jobs primarily are a real need in the African American community. All
right. Well, we thank both of you for the supports of your organizations. We couldn't have done it without you. And without further ado, let's get started. Here's my colleague, Jim Williams. He's the moderator for the evening. Jim.
Thank you, Rob. The format for tonight's debate consists of questions from our panelists to the candidates, questions from the candidates to one another, and a series of yes-no questions and a closing statement. The audience has agreed to no cheering and no interruptions, but we will make an exception as we introduce the candidates: Commissioner Jesus Chuy Garcia, Willie Wilson, Alderman Bob Fioretti, Mayor Rahm Emanuel, and William Doc Walls. These gentlemen will face some tough questions from our panelists. Veteran Chicago broadcast journalist Robin Robinson, CBS 2 chief correspondent Jay Levine, and Chicago Sun-Times reporter and assistant editor Madeline E. Hirajika. They deserve it. We're going to start the debate a little differently with a yes or no question for the candidates from the panelists. We will go in the order in which you are standing on the stage. Again, yes or no. Robin, we begin with you to Mr. Walls.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Walls, the latest census counts African Americans and Hispanics as a combined majority in Chicago, with white residents at 45%. Therefore, should so-called minority set-asides in the city be increased from 25% to 50%?
I don't think that would hurt anything. The answer is yes.
Same question, Mr. Emanuel.
Well, we have made reforms, as we did on the red line, to increase participation.
Yes or no?
So it's not a numeric. We should always increase it without it being an absolute numeric number. Hard and fast.
Same question, yes or no, Mr. Fioretti?
Yes. As these numbers are goals, we definitely ought to strive for them.
Yes?
Yes. I think it must reflect the population of Chicago to make up.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes or no question from Jay Levine.
Gentlemen, good evening. Enforcement of existing marijuana laws costs Chicago tens of millions of dollars, and disproportionately arrests target the African American community. By comparison, marijuana is legal in Colorado, and they take in tens of millions in taxes. Is it time to legalize recreational marijuana in Chicago? Mr. Walls.
Yes.
Mr. Emanuel.
No.
Yes. Not yet, but we should keep an eye toward it.
Mr. Wilson.
I would say yes, they're going to smoke it anyway.
Yes or no question from Madeline.
Mr. Walls, Chicago's ballooning fire and police pensions are greatly underfunded, leaving the city in a precarious financial state. The astronomical bill this year of $550 million has to come from somewhere. Would you support an income tax hike to address the biggest fiscal challenge facing the next mayor?
Yes, on persons who own property that's assessed at over $500,000.
That's a yes?
Yes.
An income tax? No.
No. A graduated state income tax, yes.
I would say definitely no. Why are you taxing people who don't have any money already?
Thank you.
Yes or no? Thank you. Now on to questions that require more thorough answers. The candidates have not seen these questions. They have 1 minute to answer. There may be a follow-up to any of the candidates and a rebuttal. Alderman Fioretti, you won the lottery. For the first question, it comes from Robin.
Mr. Fioretti, Chicago has the highest black unemployment rate in the nation's 5 biggest cities. 6% of this city overall is jobless, but it's 34% in West Garfield Park. You say you're going to move jobs from downtown into the neighborhoods. How exactly?
Thank you, and I do want to thank the DuSable Museum for African American History for hosting this, and especially a memorial to both Margaret and Charles Burroughs, who created this museum. And in light of that, we have been able to create jobs. I've been able to do it by Rush. We created 500 jobs. We were able to employ from on all of our large job fairs and career fairs from our communities. The same can be done throughout the West Side and South Side. We can be doing it by creating tax-free zones to bundle up businesses to come into them. At the same time, we can create areas and using our community benefits agreements to put people to work within our neighborhoods. No projects in the city should not have local workers, and that's how we are going to create jobs in our city and to make sure that they're educated in trades and vocations.
Sounds like a lot that you're going to do. How are you going to pay for this, Mr. Fioretti?
Well, first of all, trades and vocations have been eliminated under this mayor by the public school system. Let's put trades and vocations back in. At the same time, when we created 500 jobs at Rush, what did we do? We had Dawson, and we used Dawson to train people from the neighborhoods. And then we can pay for it through our educational systems.
Mr. Emanuel, you have talked a lot about trades and vocations in city colleges, but as far as the number of jobs, they also need to be going downtown. And according to research, the majority of them are going to people from majority white zip codes.
Well, first and foremost, not far from here, as you know, there's going to be a vote tomorrow at the Park District to permit actually the Obama Library to be here in the city of Chicago, in this neighborhood, if the president picks it. That would dramatically increase thousands upon thousands of jobs and lead to economic development. And it's not an accident that he's also going to be coming to Pullman, where I laid out an economic strategy for our neighborhoods. And Red Line South is a classic example. Working with the Urban League, we created 1,500 jobs reflective of the community, and hundreds of small businesses were hired on that project, which stands in direct contrast about how the Dan Ryan was done and how Metro has done its work. So we brought people back into the trades and gave them a job and a middle-class life.
Time, Mr. Emanuel. Now you get a question from Jay Levine.
Mr. Emanuel, you've been endorsed by all 3 major Chicago newspapers. You won in 2011 in the primary with big help and great majorities in the African American community. If you've done all you said you were going to do and kept all your promises, why are you having such a hard time, by all accounts, sealing the deal in the African American community?
Well, because 4 years ago, I promised that we were going to challenge the status quo. The status quo was failing the city of Chicago, failing the residents, jobs, families, and companies were leaving. And I promised that we were going to take on that, make change to policies that were forcing people to leave. We made sure that we no longer had a 2-tiered system where half our kids got a half a day of kindergarten and paid the consequences for that decision for the rest of their lives. Now every child in the city of Chicago, regardless of where they're from, gets a full day of kindergarten. We also made sure we balanced 4 budgets in a row without a property sales or gas tax increase. 4 years in a row, we put money back into the rainy day fund, and 4 years in a row, we increased our investment in after-school, summer jobs, and early childhood. And that required making changes to a system that was failing the city of Chicago. And now the city of Chicago leads in job creation, leads in companies moving back to the city of Chicago, and leads in families coming back because we were willing to challenge a failed status quo and change is a constant, and change is difficult, but it was necessary because Chicago was on the wrong course.
Jay?
Mr. Emanuel, a follow-up. If that's a strong argument for attracting voters, not losing them, why do minorities and neighborhoods feel you are neglecting them? What's the reason for it if all that what you just said is true?
Jay, the core part of politics is about leading, not about popularity. Leading requires telling people the truth, the hard truth, and doing the necessary things. We were on a course because of our politics where our kids were receiving the shortest school day and the shortest school year, and we had to make a change, and now they have a full school day, full school year, and we lead the country in big cities with the highest graduation rate. And now we're going to give kids that if you earn a B average, every child can go to community college for free, dramatically changing the trajectory of their lives. And those are important changes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jay?
To Mr. Garcia, you said you were trying to forge a black-brown coalition, yet both congressmen, Rush and Davis, have decided to support other candidates. Is that an indication that you're failing to gain traction in the African-American community?
I said that Chicago can win and change the status quo through unification of a multiracial, multi-ethnic, across-faith coalition, which is coming together to support me in my effort to become the next mayor of Chicago. That is the recipe for success. The African American and Latino communities have a history of collaborating. If they collaborated in this year, in this contest, that would certainly guarantee a win. But it's about inclusion. The fact that individuals will do what they do isn't really a surprise. There's a lot of money here. The mayor represents as the epitome of status quo and money, and many people have gone into that fold.
Mr. Garcia, time. Modeling for Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, we'll stay with you. You're a career politician, 17 years in all as an alderman, state senator, and currently a county commissioner representing a largely Latino community. What one accomplishment in public office would you point to that shows you have what it takes to lead the city of Chicago?
I have been a reform, progressive public policy maker in all of my positions. Proud to have been one of the aldermen that broke the deadlock of the Verdoliak 29 coalition, which hampered the government of Harold Washington. In the state Senate, I represented a district, fought for progressive public policies in Springfield with most good government groups. And lastly, at Cook County government, I have been an integral part of the success there with Tony Preckwinkle in turning around a government that was known for corruption, waste, and inefficiency. Proud of that record. Those are the things that I have engaged in. I've been a door opener and always a coalition builder and a unifier in all the positions that I have held.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Wilson, you are a successful businessman, but you have not served in political office. I'll ask you the same question. Can you point to one single accomplishment of your career that shows you have what it takes to run the city of Chicago?
First of all, let me acknowledge Christ, okay? Next to the pastors and next to all of y'all who's here, right? I want to get that out of the way first, right? I'm not a politician. I'm a business person. I came from 20 cents per hour, picking cotton and chopping cotton. Today, I have a company that does over $60 million a year in business. I'm grassroots. I know how to work. I know how to balance a budget with my own money. The difference between myself and running this city and these gentlemen is that I'm a business person. I've done it and did it with my own money. They've done it on the taxpayer money. So when they make a mistake, they got nothing to lose. All right? We've
Thank
done
you,
it,
Mr. Wilson. We're out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wall, Mr. Fioretti has many times over and over told us what accomplishments he believes qualify him to lead the city of Chicago. I'm going to ask you the same question over the course of your career to point to one accomplishment that you think qualifies you to run the city of Chicago.
Sure. As a top assistant to Mayor Harold Washington, the Sun-Times did a comparison between top members of the Byrne administration and key members of the Washington administration. And back in 1984, the Sun-Times declared that Byrne had no top aide as talented as Bill Walls. I was responsible for reorganizing the Department of Streets and Sanitation, the Department of Water, the Department of Sewers, the Department of Inspectional Services, sat in on 70% of Harold Washington's meeting. I was his go-to guy. I was that person that you had to get to Harold Washington. So I was trusted, even at an early age, with responsibility far beyond my years.
Thank you, Mr. Walls. We're out of time, but Robin has a question for you.
I do. I guess we can blame you or praise you for TIF that thing that very few of us understand. Tax increment financing was Harold Washington's plan to develop areas that were blighted, where development wasn't going. How has that worked out, and where would you take TIF?
It's worked out horribly, primarily because of the porting aspects of TIF. That means that you can take money from a blighted community and move it in towards downtown, one district at a time. Additionally, the focus has been skewed. I would use TIF funds for housing purposes, affordable housing, to create grocery stores in our communities, to make certain that we have infrastructure improvement consistent with other communities in the city of Chicago.
And Mr. Fioretti, you have been a constant critic of what you call the secrecy of the mayor's use of TIF funds. You call it the heroin of city economics. Does that mean that if you were mayor, you would not be a user?
I remember the answer to the first question. You know, I think we need to reform the TIFs, and this time publicly reform them. Not throw items up on the internet and say, go look for it. TIFs do serve a good purpose, but at the same time, it served the downtown more than it's helped in our communities that have been languishing and going into disrepair. We need to use and surplus TIFs, use the money for the people that it's meant to, and find the jobs that we can use out of TIFs.
Time, Mr. Fioretti. Robin?
I have one more. Mr. Garcia, you have proposed using TIF money to pay the looming pension debt. Does that seem like an appropriate use of that money?
First of all, the TIF system has been abused. It's gone on steroids, and it's been essentially for the use of whoever is on the 5th floor of City Hall, for their personal use and their cronies, of course. I think that given the challenges we're facing, especially on the pension front, that it makes sense to consider using a portion of it to make a down payment on the pension obligation that we have, so that we can restructure it by sitting with the affected at the table and figuring out how we make good on it and keep the pension funds sustainable into the future.
Out of time. Jay for Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, you've proposed turning the new nature preserve on Northerly Island back into an airport, Meigs Field. Given the controversy over putting the Presidential Library in Washington Park and the Lucas Museum on the lakefront, despite the fact that they're going to bring millions to Chicago and thousands of jobs, do you think taking even more parkland to boost the economy is a non-starter here?
Well, here's my comment on that. Is that if you have Meigs Field bring about $300 million a year, those jobs that people have with contracts, all right, and job, that's better for people to have a job and can pay their rent, lower their real estate taxes, versus somebody just in a park that never use hardly. We got a lot of parkland in Chicago, all right? What needs to be done in Chicago, this mayor need to make sure that the contracts that he given to his friend reflect all of Chicago, all right? Then you would have economic development and economic empowerment within our community. That's what really needs to be done. We got to figure it out that way and bring dollars in. We can't raise taxes no more, right?
But will the people of Chicago stand for taking away parkland, new parkland, and putting in concrete strips?
Well, we in the African American community here, I think they'd rather have food on their table and pay rent in a park.
Mr. Emanuel, you say tomorrow there's going to be a vote on Washington Park for the Presidential Library, parkland for a Presidential Library. Why doesn't the organizers just simply put that library on the 5 acres of land that the University of Chicago owns across the street from Washington Park? That would seem like a win-win. You don't take parkland, and University of Chicago has some skin in the game.
Yeah. This is a decision the president's going to make about where the park goes. They've raised some questions. I think it's essential that the Presidential Library be in the city of Chicago and not in New York. And the decision we make to make sure that it comes here is, since the President's foundation raised some questions, we're going to address those questions. So it's an easy decision because of the thousands of jobs, the thousands of economic opportunities and businesses that can be created, the educational, cultural enrichment for the south side of the city of Chicago if he chooses that area. And this is an opportunity that comes once in life. I don't want to wait for another president from the south side of Chicago to see if we can get that library.
Out of time.
We have a chance here to make a dramatic change.
Out of time. Maudlin for Mr. Fioretti.
Mr. Fioretti, City Hall says the nation's largest network of 350 red light cameras is a safety boon. A Chicago Tribune study found they caused a 22% rise in rear-end crashes, and city safety statistics severely overinflated. Others complain minority neighborhoods bear the camera burden. Is this program appropriately and equitably deployed? And if not, how do you reform it?
My answer is I would get rid of the red light cameras. This administration is married to the red light cameras. Other candidates flip-flop on whether we should have them or not. It's clear that the safety aspect is most important on red light cameras, and it shows that the rear-end collisions have increased under it. I've introduced legislation to abolish the red light cameras. And again, if it was about safety, we would have improved those intersections where those cameras are, and there's a whole host of ways to do that. We would have removed those red light cameras a long time ago.
Mr. Garcia, I'll ask you the same question. Are those red light cameras equitably and appropriately deployed? And if not, what reforms do you recite?
Per the University of Texas study that was done, it is plausible to think that they're warranted in about 14% of the locations where they're at. The rest are there to pickpocket Chicagoans, as are many other policies in terms of this administration's fees, fines, and penalties. I think we need an independent verification to determine where they're safe, and where they're deemed to be safe, we ought to keep them. The rest have to go.
Mr. Emanuel, Mr. Garcia mentions the fees and fines. That same TRIB report found that the cameras put $600 million into city coffers since 2003. You've said you've balanced budgets without property, sales, or gasoline tax hikes. But speed and red light camera tickets, hikes in city stickers, water and sewer fees, and phone and cable TV taxes hit taxpayers equally hard. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, what is the difference?
Well, the fact is, on each of those situations, we've done 4 budgets in a row that did not raise property sales or gas taxes. 4 years in a row, we dramatically increased our investments in after-school, summer jobs, and early childhood education. And 4 years in a row, rather than take money out of the rainy day fund, every year we put money back into the rainy day fund. We made dramatic changes, and the other thing is we eliminated the per-employee head tax that actually cut off jobs in the city. We did balance 4 budgets in a row without a property sales or gas tax, and increase the opportunities for our children throughout the city of Chicago every year.
Thank you, Mr. Emanuel. Robin has a question for you.
Mr. Emanuel, first, nice timing on the Sun-Times headline today about your new initiative to get more local people working on city contractors' projects in their own neighborhoods. But in general, big black business in Chicago has fizzled. We are now dead last out of 8 top markets in terms of revenue from large African-American-owned firms. Is the city doing enough professional services businesses with those firms, accounting, legal work, and heaven forbid we should get through that golden door of asset management, not just with the city, but with anchor institutions, hospitals, universities, museums? And have you leaned on your corporate friends about being more inclusive?
Robin, that's a very good question, because there's always more to do. While we have made dramatic progress, like the red line showed, it was not done like Metro has done things, or when we improved the Dan Ryan. 1,500 jobs were created there, community involvement, and the businesses in and around the area participated. That's now the standard for the CTA going forward for the Blue Line and other modernizations. We made changes at the Public Building Commission. You only used to know about what was going on in the building trades. While on all the professional services, we have a full accounting, and we've raised the standards and made sure that, in fact, minority and women-owned businesses have a fair shot, and that's the procurement reforms we've made. But we are not done making sure that everybody who wants to have a business and has a participation in the city, and one of the first things that we reformed was to make sure between the city and county that if you were valid under one, you were valid for the other, because you didn't have the
Mr. Emanuel, thank you, Robin.
To participate.
That kind of covers the city and the county, but in the private sector, where you are known to be pretty well connected, is there any conversation about changing the culture and the mindset about including more African-American professional services firms?
In fact, we just 3 years ago started an initiative where we give extra points for companies and big institutions like Exelon, like the University of Chicago, for hiring locally. in their area. They never had that credit. They never worked and strived for that area. So we actually have challenged the private sector and will continue to challenge the private sector to work with local businesses in their neighborhood to reflect where they are, where they operate, and the city as a whole. We're not done, but it is not where it used to be when we first got to office.
Robin?
Thank you. I'm done.
Jay, for Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, you have criticized the mayor for the appearance of impropriety for taking millions of dollars in campaign contributions from people who end up doing business with the city. But aren't you open to the same criticism for taking money in free legal fees for your son, legal work for your son, from a firm that ended up doing bond business with the county, and for voting and taking money, campaign contributions from a red light camera company before you made a vote? Not directly related. We're talking about appearance of impropriety here.
No. There is no conflict of interest. There is no impropriety. With respect to the first matter that you mentioned, the legal services provided to my son, it happened before I was elected to the Cook County Board of Commissioners. I did not call the company to have those services provided to him. I did not engage in that. Neither did my wife or anyone else. With respect to the second question, the contribution that I received that you're referring to came from a 30-year friend who has supported me to the Cook County Board, to other elective positions that I have sought in the City Council and in the State Senate. A longtime friend, had nothing to do. We were simply responding to a request from a suburb to install a red light camera. They chose the vendor. We had no say-so over that. Cook County has no red light cameras installed in its premises.
Jay?
Once again, we're talking about the appearance of impropriety, and isn't there also an appearance of a conflict if you are negotiating for the city of Chicago against, for example, the Chicago Teachers Union, which is funding and adding muscle to your campaign for mayor?
Jay, my record of public service speaks for itself, never blemished. I have stood up for good government. I have been transparent. I have been endorsed by the most people with the most integrity. My record of public service, because I'm not a career politician, is one that adheres to ethics, one that speaks for itself in terms of integrity. I am a public servant. I've been in and out of government. I've worked in the nonprofit and in philanthropy, always being a good steward and never involved in any controversies.
Let me move on to Mr. Manuel. You appointed a close friend to head World Business Chicago. He gave your campaign and your political action committee hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions. How is that different from Rod Blagojevich demanding people give thousands of dollars to his campaign in exchange for appointments on boards and commissions?
Well, the individual you're talking about, first of all, doesn't do any business with the city. It's clear, and says he will never do that. Second is, I'm proud that when I came to office as mayor, the city had a 20-year federal oversight of its hiring, which is where corruption started, Jay. And I ended the federal oversight, and we don't have it in any department or agency. I expanded the powers of the Inspector General, and the support I receive is because people know the consequence of lack of leadership and lack of dealing with big challenges, and they know, business and labor both supported my candidacy, that if we take on the big challenges, face them head on, seize the opportunities ahead with a sense of strength as well as with solutions, the city will attract jobs, families, and businesses.
Mr. Emanuel. Maudlin for Mr. Walls.
Mr. Walls, you seek to run the city of Chicago. Your resume seems a bit thin. Assistant to Mayor Harold Washington from 1983 to 1986, owner of American Shirt Shack, a T-shirt business, from which you've said you're semi-retired. How does this resume qualify you for mayor, number one? And number two, why should Chicagoans vote for you this time when they've rejected your candidacy myriad times over the course of nearly 30 years?
Because without equivocation, I'm the one candidate for mayor of the city of Chicago who represents the interest of the average people. I have a very complete and full understanding of everything it takes to run Chicago city government. Jane Byrne had an even more thin resume than mine when she was elected mayor of the city of Chicago. Now, we're not saying that she did a great job, but Jane Byrne did not sink the city of Chicago as it's sinking now under Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Under Mayor Rahm Emanuel, you have 40% of blacks living below the poverty line in the city of Chicago, whereas only 8% of whites are living below the poverty line. You have 13,500 vacant lots in the city of Chicago, which is killing the city because vacant lots don't generate revenue. Chicago is being run into the ground. The Brookings Institution made it clear that Chicago sinks below most of the major cities throughout the world and throughout this country. as it relates to education, as it relates to employment, as it relates to our GDP per capita. So
Hi,
Chicago,
Mr. Walls-Maudlin.
Thank you, Mr. Walls. Mr. Emanuel, Mr. Walls has accused you of pay to play. A Chicago Tribune investigation would seem to validate that. It says that you have given many, many perks to people who have been part of that $30 million campaign stash. How do you respond to that?
As I said earlier, first of all, I've participated my whole life with Senator Obama when I was a congressman. We passed landmark lobbying and ethics reform. We got the city from underneath federal oversight of our hiring because of the integrity and professionalism we put in the system. We expanded the Inspector General that helps us root out fraud and abuse throughout the system. And we made sure that we changed the culture in city government. My first 6 executive orders was about changing the culture and the ethical standards and raising them, and passing 3 separate ordinances that changed the way we operate in the city government. That is a fundamental difference from where Chicago was in the past, but our job is not done about what we have to do going forward.
Time, Mr. Emanuel.
But would you agree, Mr. Emanuel, that there is an appearance of pay to play here?
Yeah. I believe that there's a fundamental difference from when the city of Chicago had the federal government overseeing its hiring to the day that now, because of removing the Shackman decree, our entire department, every agency, is free of federal oversight that cost the taxpayers $20 million. That suit existed for 20 years. We ended it in 3 years on my watch, and it's a night and day because the Inspector General and the judge all said Chicago has professionalized its hiring, and we've expanded the powers of the Inspector General to Public Building Commission and given him and the office the independence it needs, and that has set a new standard here in the city of Chicago.
Time.
But that does not mean we should rest on our
Wilson, you have
laurels.
a question from Robin.
I'll call you too. I know you were dying to get in on. You're dying to get in on that because on the pay to play because
equally, you know.
Well, we're not going to talk about that, but I know you want to tell people that you finance your own campaign, don't take donations. So, but we're moving away from that subject, and on to public safety. You have said that you would not hire one single additional police officer. Can you tell me then, sir, how would you stop the plague of violence that is in so many of certain communities?
Yes, I wouldn't hire any more police officers. You've done that year after year. Haven't done any good, all right? African-American kid is dying by the thousands a year. Why are you going to bring more police officers in when you should take that and have be more of a friendly police atmosphere, all right? I would fire this superintendent of police that this mayor haven't fired yet, all right? And I would bring in 4, break it up in 4 districts. So, and I would integrate the police department, all right? Right now, you have from top to down, you got less than 8% African-American, Hispanic, and et cetera, all right? When you should have 32%. You make them more friendly, you bring trade into school, and when our young people get into prison, they recycle themselves back into prison. What you got to do is put trade into prison so when they get out.
Time, Mr. Wilson. Robin.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Garcia, you, on the other hand, have promised to hire 1,000 new police officers, but there are many who feel that the police are already present, that some neighborhoods are already militarized. Those who are shot in police-involved shootings are 70% plus of the time African-American. 82% of the juveniles in the temporary detention center right this minute are African-American. Young black males in particular feel harassed, they feel profiled, they feel targeted. What does hiring 1,000 new police officers do for that dynamic?
It makes a difference. One of the most fundamental responsibilities of government is to ensure the safety of its people. If we can't do that, then we have failed as a society and as a city. The reason I propose hiring 1,000 additional police officers, men and women that look like Chicago, is to make it safer by engaging in community policing, establishing relationships of trust and mutual respect, coupled with a robust initiative of restorative justice, as well as targeting the areas with the highest crime levels.
Time, Mr.
with
Garcia.
jobs. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Now we want to give you a chance to ask each other a question. We will go in the order of the stage, left to right. Mr. Walsh, you have 10 seconds to ask the question. The respondent gets 30 seconds to answer. Mr. Walsh.
Willie Wilson, your products are manufactured in China, and you don't hire people in the city of Chicago to do that work. So what does your company bring to the Chicago economy?
Well, I do have employees in Chicago. I have about 10 employees in Chicago. I got 4 in China. I do business in China because of the global economy. The clothes you're wearing, Mr. Walsh, is from China, in case you didn't know it. All right? So what haven't got to be done is this here is that, look, we give away over $800,000 $1 million a year to church and other organizations in Chicago. We have 4 D.C., 1 in Chicago, 1 in Tennessee, 1 in L.A.
Out of time, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Emanuel, your 10-second question.
Well, I'd rather talk directly to the voters about their questions, and their questions are what are we going to do for our children. Our measure.
Please, a question, Mr. Emanuel.
At least once follow the rules of what we're here for.
I'll say.
Question to a candidate, sir.
Chuy Garcia, you voted for the largest property tax in the history of Chicago, which the people are still paying for, and then you took an $8,500 illegal deduction. Why would you do that, given the consequences that everybody has to now still pay for the largest property tax increase?
As you may recall, in 1986, after I was elected to the city council, we broke the Verdoli Act 29 and the machine politicians that hampered Harold Washington. We had to deal with a deficit that accumulated from the previous administration over a 3-year period. We finally did it. We got Chicago working. Everyone who voted for it, including some people that are supporting you in your re-election, Mr. Mayor, got re-elected. We did the right thing by Chicago. What was at stake was 5,000 police officers being laid off.
Time, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Fioretti, your 10-second question.
Thank you. This is to the mayor. You've amassed a $30 million campaign war chest to rewrite history. Every ad that you've shown has been repudiated by the very groups that you claim to help. What do you say to the people that your ads brag about and that they say to you that you've screwed them?
Well, Bob, 4 years ago, half the kids in the city of Chicago used to get a half day of kindergarten. And I believe, fundamentally, the kids pay the consequences because a lot of elected officials were complicit with their complacency. They allowed our kids to get a half day of kindergarten. Every child now in the city of Chicago has a full day of kindergarten, regardless of where they live. Every child no longer has the shortest school day or the shortest school year. They also now have a full school day and full school year. And our community colleges are finally focused on giving people both jobs and careers. And we're going to make sure that families do not go into the poorhouse, trying to provide for their children a college education and a career that comes with it.
Time, Mr. Garcia.
4 years ago, Mr. Mayor, you promised to make Chicago a safer city. 4 years later, there have been 10,000 shootings in Chicago, 1,800 homicides. Do you feel any personal responsibility at knowing that all of these things have occurred on your watch and you failed to keep your promise to hire 1,000 additional police officers?
We did, Chuy. Too many kids in the city of Chicago have had their childhood stolen because of gun violence when they should hear the sounds of laughter. I'm honored today that Father Pfleger is here with me as my guest because of his work and my work and our commonality. And today I received the endorsement of the Gun Control Group because we are fighting gun violence. It's been part of my life, my whole life, in fighting to make sure I take on the Washington and NRA gun lobby and make sure that our streets are safe. And I do bear, and everybody bears who's an adult, an accountability to give our children back their responsibility. Nobody
We're out of time.
who's an adult
Mr.
ever gets a
Emanuel,
pass.
we're out of time. Mr. Wilson, your 10-second question, please.
This is to the mayor. Mayor, it was recommended 119 schools, I believe, to be closed, and you closed 50 of those schools. If you were re-elected as mayor, will you close the other 6 or 9 schools in the community?
I put a moratorium with Barbara Byrd Bennett and Andrea Zopp, who's a host here, who's on the Chicago Public School Board. We put a moratorium in place because we did not believe, after we made the changes necessary because kids were enrolled in underperforming and under-enrolled schools, it was important to give them an alternative, just like it's the same thing important to give every child a full day of kindergarten, a full day of school year, and a full, make sure that also our high schools have increasing graduation. We put a moratorium so we can focus on the fact that now, unlike 4 years ago, where 4 out of 10 kids were dropping out of high school in short time, 8 out of 10 will be graduating from our high schools and on their way to a better future because we fundamentally changed the trajectory by making sure we have a rising graduation rate.
We are out of time for this phase of the debate. We're going to return to questions from the panelists to the candidates. Jay, you are up for Mr. Fioretti.
Mr. Fioretti, we've heard about 1,000 police officers a number of times tonight, but you know, that's just political shorthand for what the opponents call a failed crime-fighting strategy. What specific moves would you make, whether you get these officers or not, to do something that Rahm Emanuel has not done to bring down the level of violence in this community and throughout the city?
First of all, Jay, I said that we should hire 500 new police officers, and we found it in the budget before. However, this mayor and the superintendent decide to not invest in our police officers on the street and give them the resources that they need, but rather what they talk about is having press conferences regarding fudging the numbers. I would make sure that we have good economic programs in our communities, make sure that our children who have and need vocational and trade schools and courses in our schools. At the same time, I will fight all
Out of time, Mr. Fioretti. Jay, one follow-up. One follow-up.
Mr. Emanuel, the way I understand it, instead of hiring 1,000 new police officers, you're using overtime and spending perhaps $100 million to pay the overtime of police instead of hiring more police officers. People say that leads to a demoralized, overworked, out of sorts police force. How do you respond to that?
Jay, when I came to office, we had police officers who were trained to do police work. We're sitting behind desks doing clerical work. We moved 400 of them into the community doing community policing. We took another 600 that were driving around the city and put them in the most affected areas. But to fight crime, you need to put more police on the street and get kids, guns, and drugs off the street. And that makes a dramatic increase in after school and summer jobs, so our kids having a positive alternative that comes with that. It means also making sure that we change the laws in Springfield, just like we did here in Chicago, with the toughest gun laws in the nation for any city.
Thank you, Mr. Emanuel. I have to tell you, the panelists, this. Only one follow-up question now. We're running out of time, according to our timekeepers. Okay, modeling, you're up for Mr. Emanuel.
Well, I'll stay with Mr. Emanuel. Schools have long been the anchors of every community, whether you're talking about North Side Avondale or West Side North Lawndale. In struggling West and South Side areas, however, those anchors are now just empty, shuttered, or boarded up hulks. Why was repurposing not part of the immediate aftermath of these closings, and what specific proposal and timeline do you have for these buildings?
If you go to the Libby School, it's now a parent-teacher early childhood center, because we did exactly what you talked about, which is to repurpose it to give parents and children the early childhood education they need, which is one of the services that we're also now receiving $600 million from the federal government. Lafayette has now become the new home permanently for the Chicago Arts High School that used to go from building to building year after year. And we're also taking on another proposal for another school to make it a housing facility. So the fact is, we're working through each of those issues.
Thank you. One other question, Mr. Emanuel. Distrust of City Hall.
Don't worry, this is like dinner table for me with 3 teenagers, so don't worry about it.
Go ahead, Maud.
Distrust of City Hall has been fostered by the closing of those 50 schools, a major issue in our community. And you had the stated reasons of under-enrollment and cost savings. However, this was immediately followed by charters sprouting up in areas where those same schools were closed. With charters now 25% of the district, should there not be a moratorium on charters competing for the same diminishing student population?
What we have ensured, well, first of all, is we put 2 charters already are going to be closed because they're not meeting the standards, and 17 on notice. And what we have to ensure, this is a debate in ensuring that every school provides a quality education. And those that do not, regardless of whether it's a military school, a charter school, a neighborhood school, an international baccalaureate school, they must achieve quality education because our kids do not get a do-over. Kids start dropping out of college in 3rd grade, which is why we have to get to them by 3 years old and ensure that they have the education they need.
Time, Mr. Emanuel. I want to remind the candidates we've got a timekeeper down here. He'll let you know when it's time to wrap up. Let's go to Robin for Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, between African Americans and the city at large, there is a huge gap. Health, wealth, education, you name it, we're at the bottom of it. I'd like to know, from your experience, your research, and from your heart, what do you think is the main cause of this disparity, and what is the most important thing that you can do to change it?
Disparities in Chicago, as in any other major city, are life determinants. They determine how well someone does in society, from birth to death, how they will succeed in school, what kind of jobs they will get, what kind of quality of life they will enjoy, at what age they might be shot if they live in the really underprivileged communities. I think the solution to it is for Chicago to develop an approach to its development that is rooted in equity, such as King County and the city of Seattle have embarked on. That is how you address inequality in cities.
Time, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you.
Mr. Walls, I would ask you, because you look like you're raring to answer that one, is understanding the history of African American disenfranchisement necessary to fixing it?
Absolutely. You know, from 1619 to 1865, we had 246 years of legalized slavery in America. And then we had Jim Crow for 100 years. Blacks have not been treated any better under this administration than we were under Jim Crow. Blacks are disenfranchised. We're not allowed in most areas of the city. We're priced out of most areas in this city, and it's unfair and unequal. There are two Chicagos. Rahm Emanuel has a Chicago on the north, northwest, southwest sides, and a whole different philosophy of governing on the south and west sides of the city of Chicago.
Time, Mr.
and it hasn't gotten any better.
Time, Mr. Walls, but Jay has a question for you.
Mr. Walls, we found out this morning that President Obama is coming to Chicago 5 days before the election to announce that Pullman will become a National Historic Site. Is this going to be a game changer when he gives Mr. Emanuel credit for this?
I don't believe it will be. Surprise, surprise. People were expecting Barack Obama to come in and endorse Rahm Emanuel because Rahm Emanuel is in trouble. His failed policies have not endeared himself to the people of the city of Chicago. The people of the city of Chicago aren't doing any better now than they were prior to his election, prior to his administration. People remember how good it felt when Harold Washington was mayor of the city of Chicago. You knew that you had opportunity. You knew that you had a place, and you knew that you had someone fighting for you. People do not feel like that about Rahm Emanuel, and even Barack coming here will not help him.
Jay?
Mr. Wilson, is the president playing politics with Pullman?
I think the president, if coming supporting this mayor is wrong. I think by his support, he's telling us, the African American community, it was okay to close down 50 schools. Is he telling Chicago that last year he sent $1.1 billion to Chicago housing, and all that money was spent, and only $144,000 went to African American contractors? Is he saying that? If he's saying that, look, the money that we economic empowerment, economic development, and growth.
Time, Mr. Wilson. Modeling for Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, as noted earlier, the Sun-Times was first to report that the mayor announced a new proposed ordinance today that would give incentives to contractors to hire subcontractors and thus boost jobs in our communities. You have said something about this at some point earlier today. I think you said that your idea was stolen. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think that I've always said this at first. What this mayor is doing is taking all the dollars. It's about $2 billion spent last year, less than 1%. Went to African American. You know, I've always said that, look, the dollars that have got to get back into the African American community to keep down this crime. You know, I've always said that you introduce legislation in the city council so that it applied to all citizens equally, that it get back in the African American community. And he brought that out today. I think he did good from Carbon to me. He got 2 more weeks to be mayor.
Time, Mr. Wilson, modeling.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And let me ask you one last question. In your book, What Shall I Do Next?, you say, I am still often uncomfortable when I meet white people for the first time. And at City Club, you said, to the whites here, I'm letting you know I'm not prejudiced. How will your comfort level impact your ability to run a city where whites, though now only 45% of the population, constitute the lion's share of Chicago city government, power brokers, and corporate base?
Well, you know what, I'm from Louisiana. Somebody said that you can't speak well, and maybe that's true. It was a slip of my speaking I'm brought up from, all right? You know, look, I supported Bruce, white Republican. I got a white friend. It was a white man that got me in business, all right? All right, look, I love everybody, the people. I'm up here with a white man now, 2 of them, all right? And listen, if I wanted to speak proper more, people say, you ought to get a teacher to teach you. I said, well, look, If I wanted somebody to teach me, I got enough money to buy 20 teachers to teach me, all right?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. We're out of time here.
All right?
Once again, we're going to ask you to ask one another a question. Mr. Wilson, you went the last time we did this. You asked the first question. Remember, please, 10-second question.
You want me to repeat?
And you can ask a 10-second question to your fellow candidates, any of the fellow candidates.
This is to the mayor. Mayor, last year you spent over $2 billion. Will you make sure that out of the $2 billion that you spent, that African Americans would get back at least 32% of that $2 million?
I'm committed to making sure that Chicago, the city that works for everyone. It means using what we did on the Red Line when we developed it, the 1,500 jobs that included community members, become the standard which it is now in the CTA. That's also true of the small businesses that were involved. I'm committed to making sure that we open up all of the city government, not just to a few, but to every company, small, medium, and large, to participate in a city that's finally growing both in businesses, population, and also has a significant drop in unemployment. But I will not rest until we do it all.
To Mr. Emanuel. Mr. Emanuel, why can't you list a longer set of neighborhoods where you've invested in economic development in Chicago besides two on the south side, one where you've been asking the president to designate a national park? Why not more? There are 77 communities in Chicago.
I'm proud of the fact that the investments we've made in Pullman through Neighborhood Now, by investing in our roads, our schools, our public transportation, our parks, our libraries, have created the foundation for Walmart to open up a 400-employee store, Ross to come in, Pullman, that is Method, to be the first new factory there in 30 years, and to give people employment and opportunity. And the president, now by designating Pullman as a national designation as a park, provides the crown jewel to Pullman coming back. That's also true of the investments we've made in Bronzeville.
Mr. Fioretti, your question, sir.
Thank you.
Neighborhoods.
This is for Mr. Garcia. 40 years in politics, and you take a campaign contribution from an individual on a vote the day before, the red light cameras. At the same time, in a short period of time after you declared your candidacy, you decided to change your position on elected school board. How can the voters trust what you say here today and what you're going to do tomorrow? And how can you be the voice of progressive politics when you've changed your stances so many times?
Bob, you're not my opponent, and I have never criticized you, even though there were many opportunities to do so. My opponent is standing to your right there. With respect to the contribution that I received, I have known this person for over 30 years. I've not been involved in politics 40 years. I'm not as old as you are. Also, with respect to the other things, there are insinuations, that's rumor and innuendo, and I will abide by the agreement that we had that we would not criticize each other's campaigns.
Time, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Emanuel, your question, sir.
Well, to Bob Fioretti, you voted in favor of privatizing the parking meter deal. You said you studied it for 4 days. I don't know what you looked at.
No, we did not.
Okay. What I want to know is, once you voted for it, which gave away our free Sundays, I forced the company to return free Sundays to the neighborhood in the city of Chicago, and then you voted against that. So you voted to take away free Sundays.
You have a question, Mr. Emanuel?
Why would you vote for selling the parking meter deal in the first place?
First of all, on the original deal before us, the administration lied to us. Your administration instead did not only lie to us, but refused to give us the documents that we requested to make an informed decision on a vote. And then, in fact, when you were in front of the court case, you were asked, and your lawyers vigorously defended the special interests, the bankers who are profiting off of the people of this city, when we could have broken that agreement. You have made that ironclad, and now the people are going to suffer from your decision.
Mr. Walls, your question. 10 seconds.
Rahm Emanuel, under your watch, police officers have shot and killed blacks and Latinos at a higher rate than in most cities. And you have yet to speak out about that. You have not shown leadership on that issue. Why? Now you come into the black community and you want to campaign for votes, but you think that we have a short memory. We don't. Why do you think that we have a short memory?
I don't think that. I think this is a very important issue, because when I came to office as mayor, community policing that was founded here in the city of Chicago had become an office, not a philosophy. That's why I put officers back from behind the desk onto the street, practicing community policing, building trust. It is essential that there is trust between the community and law enforcement, because other than that, then it's just law enforcement trying to impose safety rather than build safety, working with community leaders. And everybody in the police department, from the superintendent down to the beat officer, practices and must embody the idea of community policing, which is fundamentally about building trust. And without trust, we will never work together to bring the safety to every neighborhood and every community that every child deserves.
Time now for closing statements. Each candidate will have 30 seconds. The order has been determined by a lottery. Mr. Fioretti, you go first.
Thank you. I want a city that works for everyone here. I believe that we need a leader that is tough and fair. And yet at the same time, we need to reach out to all of our communities. My pledge to you, the voters of this city, is I will work tirelessly for you, for your communities, to make sure that we restore the trust in our government, to make sure that we have the jobs that are necessary. And I believe in safe streets and strong neighborhoods, and we have that by the people working with us together in each and every community across this city.
Mr. Garcia?
I have lived in Chicago neighborhoods all of my life in Chicago. I've raised a family. I have struggled to improve community. I have the scars to prove it. I'm seeking this office because I've been urged by people in Chicago to change the status quo, and the epitome of the status quo, Mayor Rahm Emanuel. It's time that Chicago be a place that is prosperous for everyone, with safe communities and good schools, and the opportunity for all the neighborhoods to thrive, with jobs and opportunities for people to grow old in.
Mr.
We
Walz,
need to
your
grow
30
the population
seconds.
of Chicago.
I'm the only candidate for mayor of the city of Chicago who will keep Chicago's promise. That's a commitment to public safety, public education, affordable housing, senior care, full employment, balanced economic development, equal access for the disabled, and when all else fails, charity. I'm the only candidate for mayor of the city of Chicago who can unify this city by promoting cultural and diversity sensitivity amongst people of all ages, races, socioeconomic backgrounds, all religious persuasions, all sexual orientations, all physical and mental disabilities and limitations, because I understand that none of us is any better than the rest of us.
Mr. Wilson, your 30 seconds, sir.
I think that we all need to have prayer, and I'm going to pray, all right? And I'm going to pray for the lady who got killed, the ISIS people today. I pray for everybody up here. This is my prayer. And dear Lord, we thank you for your grace and your mercy. Thank you, dear Lord, for all of us allowing us to get here tonight. And bless all of these men up here today, dear Lord, and all the women and all of us who came tonight. We ask you for your grace and your mercy. We ask, dear Lord, for your loving kindness. For though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself a servant unto all, that I might gain the most. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow us all the days of our life, and that we should dwell, O Lord, in your house forever. And as we get ready to leave this place, dear Lord,
Forgive me,
get in the
Mr.
car
Wilson.
and guide us home and drive us
Time.
out.
Hate to cut off that pipeline, but Mr. Emanuel?
Amen. It's a prayer. You do not interrupt prayer.
Chicago is known as a city that works. But to be true, it has to be a city that works for everyone. That means making sure that everybody has the education they need to succeed in life. That means to make sure that we have a community college system that is no longer the 5th and 6th year of high school, but is a community college system that provides people a job and a career and a middle-class life. I look forward to making sure that every family,
Thank
that
you
if
for
their
joining
child
us,
earned a
everybody,
B
here at the
average in high
DuSable
school,
Museum.